In this video, we'll show you both what to pack and how to pack for a glacier climb in the Pacific Northwest. The content in this video applies to climbs of Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Shuksan via the Sulphide Glacier, Mount Rainier via the Disappointment Cleaver or Enman's Winthrop routes, and other glaciated routes in the North Cascades of Washington. When you pack well, you'll have a pack that is light, streamlined, and comfortable. You'll also have everything you need for your trip and nothing more. When packed poorly, a pack can be heavy, cumbersome, or even painful. Now let's take a closer look at the gear, clothing, and food you'll carry on your climb and how to pack it.
So when it comes to backpacks for a 2 to 3 day trip, a lot of times what you're going for is something in the 60 to 70 liter range. And the reason for that is you want to put all of your gear inside the pack as well as group gear. And having a 60 to 70 liter pack will allow you to do that. If you're a really experienced backpacker, you've been doing this for a while, and you have ultralight gear like a 900 fill down sleeping bag, then you might be able to get away with something smaller. So for instance, our guides often use ultralight 50 to 60 liter backpacks. But again, in order to use a pack that's closer to 50 liters in size, then you want to make sure that you're pretty experienced packing your pack and have really compressible things to go inside. For trips that are lasting 4 to 5 days, you're going to need more food. You might also still be carrying the same amount of technical gear. You may need a little bit more clothing, especially if it's wetter outside. And so you're going to need a larger backpack. So for those trips, a lot of times we're going up to a 70 to 80 liter backpack. And it's nice to have a pretty comfortable frame to carry the loads involved. However, as mentioned before, if you're an experienced backpacker, especially if you're doing something longer like Mount Olympus or Glacier Peak, you want to have some experience backpacking for those types of trips, and then you might be able to get away with a pack that's closer to 60 or 70 liters in size, as long as you pack well and make sure that you have ultralight gear, like that 900 fill down sleeping bag and an ultralight tent, for example. But a large pack is a nice way to go if you're just getting into it, and to ensure that you have a frame to accommodate the load so you're a little bit more comfortable. There are 3 different attachment systems for ice axes on backpacks, or 3 general attachments, I should say. The first one we're going to take a look at here has T-bars and a bungee toggle. So first, Burke is going to find the T-bars, and he'll slot the part of the head of the axe called the pick into a protector, and then thread the T-bar. Once that's secure, he'll work his way up the shaft of the axe, secure the shaft with the bungee and toggle. The next way we'll look at how to attach an ice axe to a backpack is with the clip, buckle, and Velcro toggle system. And here we're starting with the head of the ice axe, placing it through a triangular piece of fabric that protects the pack from puncture, and then clipping buckles right around, making sure the buckle goes around the back of the head of the ice axe, called the adze tool. And then we're going to secure the shaft of the axe just like previously, but this time using a piece of Velcro. The final way for attaching an ice axe to a backpack is the old school way. Here you just have a loop of nylon at the very bottom of a pack, as well as a toggle at the top. And first you're going to insert the spike of the axe, which is at the very end of the shaft. So the axe is inverted. Flip it over so you can see now that the axe head is captured. And then you're going to engage the bungee toggle at the very top to secure the ice axe to the pack. Now it can't fall out the bottom of that piece of nylon webbing. One common mistake when using the webbing loop method for attaching an ice axe to a backpack is to twist the ice axe instead of folding or rolling the ice axe into the pack. So here you can see Burke has put the axe on the pack, but he's twisted that nylon webbing. So the axe might seem secure, But as you're walking down the trail over time, the axe can work its way down and the shaft can slide right off the pack. Some backpacks also have an external crampon attachment system or pouch. However, when possible, we recommend that instead of using that pouch or attachment system, you put your crampons inside a separate bag, a lightweight bag, and then put that inside the backpack itself. That allows you to have a better distribution of weight, keeping the weight of the crampons closer to your back. One other item that you'll see on most of our packing lists is a contractor bag. A contractor bag is essentially a very thick, durable trash bag that can be used multiple times. And these can be purchased at hardware stores. They typically come in rolls and cost about $1 a piece. Usually the rolls around 15 pieces or 15 contractor bags for around $15. These are used to line the inside of your backpack to waterproof your gear, which is really important here in the Northwest, where we get a fair amount of rain in the early season and snow and rain occasionally even in later season on our trips. When selecting a pack, keep in mind you'll be carrying group gear in addition to your personal clothing, food, and equipment. This might include fuel bottles, pots, stoves, a rope, or a portion of a tent. The pack sizes recommended in the video will accommodate this additional gear if you pack it tightly and don't add any additional items. Take a look at the group gear we've got laid out here. When it comes to helmets, we're looking for helmets that are lightweight, that offer a little bit of breathability for your head because you're going to be hiking uphill in sometimes pretty warm temps in the sunshine. And you want to make sure that it's a climbing specific helmet. So here is a ski helmet here at the back. And ski helmets oftentimes have insulation inside. They tend to be a little bit heavier. They sometimes have ear guards. And this is more than we need, and it's going to be much warmer than we need. So let's stick with climbing helmets for our purposes when we're hiking up glaciers. And there's really two general model styles. One are completely hard, the other have softer outer components. The softer helmets tend to be much lighter weight, but less durable. So if you do have a softer style helmet, such as this Petzl Sirocco, you want to be careful about where you pack it. I try not to pack this inside my backpack. I might attach it to the outside, and I'm very careful if it is attached to the outside of my pack or if it's stuffed inside my pack that it don't sit on my pack. Otherwise, you might want to stick with something a little bit more durable, like this guy here. Other than that, there's not much more to know about helmets. When it comes to harnesses, any harness that is rated for rock climbing or general mountaineering will work. And a rock climbing harness typically is a little bit bulkier, has a larger belay loop. That's this loop that's connecting these leg loops to this waist loop here. Whereas those designed for general glacier travel tend to be less bulky, and they have a few other features that are nicer if you're choosing one specifically for glacier travel, including the ability to release the leg loops. So you can step into and out of the harness without taking on and off your boots or on and off your crampons. Or if nature calls at an unexpected time and it's safe to come off the rope, it's usually easier to come out of a glacier harness than it is to come out of a rock climbing harness. But for the purposes of our trips, if you already own a rock climbing harness and you know you're going to continue to use it in the future, there's nothing wrong with bringing it. When it comes to mountaineering boots here in the Northwest, we're looking at two general models of boots. Both of these are single boots, which means that the boot is composed of one piece that you slide your foot into, not two parts, which would be more of an expedition boot or double boot. And these single boots come in two general varieties if they're made for mountaineering. They come in 3-season boots, which would be this pair over here, and 4-season boots, which would be this pair. The primary difference between 3-season and 4-season boots is going to be comfort in terms of walking. 4-season boots tend to be more rigid, which means they have a sole that is completely inflexible. And 3-season boots tend to have a little bit more rocker on the toe and a slight amount of flex, which makes it much more comfortable when hiking long distances. The other difference is going to be warmth. 3-season boots tend not to be as warm as 4-season boots. The reason for the difference in rigidity is that a 4-season boot is intended for being entirely on snow, and when you're kicking into the snow slope, having a rigid sole is much more helpful than having a flexible sole, and will result in less strain on your foot over time, versus if you're walking more on dirt trails, you might want a 3-season boot. Now, specifically, the peaks that I tend to use a 3-season boot on here in the Northwest are Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, most of the peaks in the North Cascades like Sahale Peak or Forbidden Peak, and essentially any peak that's under 11,000 foot in height, but not Mount Rainier. I also might avoid using a 3-season boot if it's, say, before July 1st, and I know the temperatures are going to be especially cold, or if I were getting a pair of rentals and my trip was before July 1st, then maybe I might start leaning toward a 4-season boot, especially if I know that I tend to have cold feet. The other difference between the 3-season and the 4-season single boot is the attachment system for the crampons that's available. So on this 3-season boot, you'll notice that it has a relatively round toe, and there's no lip of plastic at the front. Whereas if you look closely at this boot, you'll see that there's a lip of plastic right in front of the toe called a toe welt. Both of these types of boots will have a lip of plastic on the heel. Here it's bright yellow. And on this, it's a small indentation of dark plastic. That's called a heel welt. That will allow for the attachment of a crampon. However, on the 3-season mountaineering boot, you can only have a crampon that will attach to a heel welt, whereas on a 4-season mountaineering boot, you can have a crampon that will attach to both a toe and a heel welt. Generally, the crampons that attach to both a toe and a heel welt are called full automatic crampons, whereas those that attach just to a heel welt are called semi-automatic crampons. In addition to mountaineering boots, you also often want a pair of trail running shoes or hiking shoes. The reason for that is there's long distances on trail to some peaks. So those peaks would certainly be peaks like Glacier Peak, Mount Olympus. Some people may also want them for a peak like Mount Baker, although that's really a matter of preference. If you have comfortable enough mountain boots for Mount Baker, I tend to just stick with mountain boots for that trip. Trail running shoes, I would advise against bringing Gore-Tex, because Gore-Tex, although it will keep your feet a little bit more waterproof for a short period of time, it will also keep that moisture in, and it'll tend to keep your feet wet over a longer trip. So something really lightweight, good mesh, good grip, and most importantly, that's really comfortable for you. Sometimes you might also be using these shoes for crossing creeks and rivers, and so having something that will dry quickly is going to be really important. Crampons are one of the most important pieces of mountaineering gear because they're your primary attachment to the mountain a lot of the times. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about crampons. So first, the type of crampons that I recommend for our trips when you're doing glacier travel are 10 to 12 point crampons that don't have vertically aligned front points. Those with vertically aligned front points are meant primarily for ice climbing. If you are doing an ice climbing trip, however, like the North Ridge of Mount Baker, then you might choose a pair of ice climbing crampons that also work well for glacier travel. The crampons that I have here in front of me are the primary types of crampons that we often have on our trips and courses. Here on my left, the right side of the camera here, is a pair of strap-on crampons. Strap-on simply means that their attachment or binding system uses this long piece of webbing which is threaded through a toe piece and then back through a heel piece in order to secure the crampon. Strap-on crampons work on all types of mountaineering boots, regardless of whether you have a toe welt, heel welt, or both. Over on the left-hand side of the camera, you'll see this is a semi-automatic pair of crampons. A semi-automatic pair of crampons will have a strap in the back along with a heel lever and a toe piece. Just like with a strap-on crampon, you have a strap that's going to be threaded through that toe piece to connect. One of the primary differences, however, is that heel lever requires that there is a heel welt to attach to. This binding system tends to be a little bit more secure and tight than the strap, which oftentimes will loosen progressively over the course of many hours of hiking. If you're renting crampons, make sure that the person you're renting from or the shop you're renting from matches your boot to the rental crampon. If you're purchasing crampons and you're choosing between these options, I generally will recommend a semi-automatic binding with a heel lever and this plastic toe piece, because it's a little bit faster to attach and it's a little bit more secure. If you're purchasing crampons, just like if you're renting crampons, it's super important that you bring in your boot that you're intending on using on the mountain and have one of the sales representatives there at the shop fit your crampon to the boot appropriately. If you don't have a really tight fit and your crampon pops off while you're on steep terrain, it could be pretty dangerous for you in the mountains. So here I have a couple types of crampons that you want to avoid. Both of these crampons are made out of aluminum rather than steel. One of the reasons that we're trying to avoid aluminum is because of its durability. It tends to dull quickly, and if you're in steep terrain that also is hard, like hard ice in late season, and you don't have enough traction, that could be dangerous. Another reason we're trying to avoid aluminum is almost all of our glacier mountaineering trips are going to cross areas of rock, and the rock can damage and even bend these aluminum crampons over time. So we don't want to have to do field repairs and maybe postpone or cancel a summit attempt as a result. The other feature of these crampons that we'd like to avoid is you can see on this particular crampon, instead of having a sizing bar in the middle that's rigid, made out of a piece of metal, it's made out of webbing material. This tends to work pretty well on extremely rigid mountain boots or ski boots, but it doesn't always work well on the mountaineering boots that we're bringing on our trips, which are a little bit more comfortable to walk in, especially on on dirt trails. So this could pop off of your foot unexpectedly. These are better crampons for crossing low-angle snow fields on alpine routes that don't have glacier crossing, or maybe if you're doing ski mountaineering. So we'll try to avoid crampons that are made out of aluminum or those that don't have rigid sizing bars in the middle. Other items that you'll need with your crampons are a lightweight crampon bag. I like this crampon bag by Petzl because it weighs almost nothing. You can stuff your crampons in it easily, and you can roll that up, and then that'll stuff inside your backpack in a nice tight package. You'll also want to make sure, you should be checking out the sizing of your crampons relative to your boots while you're at the shop where you're purchasing or renting. But sometimes, especially if you have a particularly large foot, or very occasionally a particularly small foot, you may actually need to purchase a different sizing bar than comes in the packaging with your crampons. It's a really important thing to consider because a lot of times shops may not even have this in stock, and you might need to order it directly from the retailer, in this case Petzl. The final thing you want to check for are what are called anti-bot plates. These are simply pieces of plastic that fit inside the crampon and prevent snow from binding up in the crampon. Most modern crampons that are designed for glacier travel come with these already installed. You don't need to get them separately. But in the event you're renting crampons, you're borrowing a buddy's crampons who is mountaineering back in the day, or you have an older pair of crampons, you might need to get yourself a pair of anti-bot plates separately from the crampons and make sure that they are installed before you go out into the field, because if you get crampon bot or balling of snow underneath the crampons, it could cause you to slip in a precarious situation. Here we're talking about ice axes, and when I'm talking about ice axes, that's a little different than an ice tool. In North America, ice tools are used for climbing very, very steep snow or low angle to steep ice. And the pick, which is this sharp part on the head of the axe, is angled a little bit differently. For ice axes, these are not designed primarily for ice climbing. They're designed primarily for self-arrest, which is stopping yourself if you were to slide down a steep or hard snow slope. And because that's their design, you'll notice this pick slowly droops down this direction, called a drop point, and that helps add friction as you slide down a snow slope. The other thing you'll notice about ice axes is the vast majority of ice axes will have this triangular shaped tool on the back called an adze. The adze tool is designed for chopping in snow or hardened snow called neve in order to dig. Maybe you're digging snow anchors for your tent, or maybe you're even chopping steps to go up a slightly steeper angle of hardened snow in a particular location on a glacier. One of the things that's commonly talked about with ice axes is the length of the ice axe. For most of our trips, we recommend that you bring a trekking pole in addition to your ice axe, which reduces the impact on your knees and makes travel on a glacier a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more ergonomic. If you are using a trekking pole in addition to your ice axe, then you can have quite a short axe because you're not using your axe in the same way you'd be using a trekking pole. You'll have a trekking pole in one hand and the axe in the other. So you could have an axe as short as 45 centimeters, and that would be fine. If you're not planning on bringing a trekking pole on your trip, then it might be nice to have a little bit of a longer ice axe. And then the length of the ice axe that we recommend for the standard routes that we tend to guide on Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Olympus, and in the North Cascades National Park would be an ice axe that comes to just above that large bone that sticks out on the side of your ankle. And that way you can use the ice axe as sort of a cane, you know, whether you're learning to use the ice axe with the pick forward or the pick backward, both are correct, and both are used differently in different parts of the world. But in that orientation, you'll be able to use the spike on the snow when the terrain gets steeper. What you try to avoid is getting an ice axe that's so long that the spike, which is this pointy tip here, is in contact with the snow on low angle terrain, because once the terrain gets steeper and you really want the ice axe for balance, then it might be positioned a little bit too high for comfort. So some ice axes will come with this extra piece of material added to them as a wrist leash, or some people will add one that clips into their harness so that in the event they're in steep terrain and they lose their balance for a second and let go of their axe, they're not going to drop the axe. For the purposes of our trips, we're going to remove all those because although it does prevent you from losing your axe if you were to slip and drop the axe, it also can become a tripping hazard in itself. And so we're trying to avoid a slip and fall at all costs in the first place. So if you have any of those materials, just take them off of your ice axe, and you can leave those at home. Just bring your ice axe as is. And it's not a bad idea, you know, if you've just purchased a new axe, other people on the trip may have done the same. So label your ice axe. You can put a piece of tape on it. You can write on it with your own Sharpie marker, however you want to identify this ice axe as yours. When it comes to ice axes, there's two general categories of axes that we want to avoid if we're just using the ice axe for glacier travel. The first are ultralight ice axes that might better be suited to trail runners, thru hikers, or ski mountaineers that are primarily composed of aluminum, but aren't strong enough to either chop in really hardened neve, which is kind of like snow that's on its way to becoming glacier ice, or aren't strong enough to pound in a picket, which is a type of snow anchor used in crevasse rescue. This axe, if I were to try to pound in a picket, I could easily break the adze tool on the back or break the pick on the front. The other type that we generally want to avoid but would be more acceptable is a technical ice tool. Technical ice tools tend to be more expensive, heavier, and not as adept at self-arrest due to the different shape of the pick here compared to those picks that are designed primarily for self-arrest. An ice tool, again, is designed mostly for ice climbing. However, if you're on one of our trips like the North Ridge of Mount Baker, or maybe you're climbing a more technical route in North Cascades National Park, the packing list might call for an ice tool because we would prefer that you have a tool that climbs very steep snow or even steep ice better than your typical ice axe. A trekking pole is another, I wouldn't say essential, but really helpful piece of equipment when we're out there in the mountains. And you know, any type of trekking pole or ski pole will work for this. If you're really honing in on what's going to work best, you know, I like a 3-section pole that collapses well. It may or may not have a snow basket. If you're climbing before July 1st, a snow basket can be helpful, but it's certainly not essential. It could be lightweight, it could be heavier. All that really matters is that it's durable enough for the trip. And you'll notice I've only got one type of trekking pole or one trekking pole up here, because usually once you're on the glacier, you'll have one trekking pole and then your other hand will be free with your ice axe. The pack is especially heavy for you. You could bring 2 trekking poles with your axe attached to your backpack on the way to camp. Then once you're in camp, leave one trekking pole behind and then carry the trekking pole in one hand and the ice axe in the other, all the way up to the summit and back down, and then use your 2 trekking poles on the way back down from camp to the trailhead again. Carabiners are an important piece of safety equipment we use in the mountains. We use them for attaching ourselves to the rope when we're doing glacier mountaineering. If something happens, we might use them, say, for crevasse rescue as well. And there are a few different types of carabiners. The biggest thing to keep in mind is the carabiners that you are using must be rated for climbing applications. You should not go on Amazon and buy a carabiner from a brand that you've never seen before. Doesn't matter how much you're saving. Your life may depend on this thing. And when we're talking about carabiners, we're not talking about this type of carabiner or keychain carabiner. We're talking about these larger ones that on the spine or this long side, if you look at it, you will see there are some numbers on there. It will tell you that it's CE rated and how many kilonewtons it's good for. Okay, so that's an important factor. Here I've just thrown out a few different types of carabiners to show. This is a non-locking carabiner. Non-locking carabiner, if you press into the gate opens. These are types of locking carabiners where once the mechanism is engaged on the gate, if the gate is pressed, it will not open. This is called a screw gate carabiner because it takes a screw action to open and close the gate. This gate has a spring in it and takes a single twist action followed by a pull action. This is called a twist lock carabiner, which has two actions again, twist and pull. And then this final takes three actions. It takes a push forward, a twist, and then a pull. The three-action locking carabiner. This one is called a tri-act lock or a tri-action or triple-action locking carabiner. These all have different functions. Oftentimes, a triple-action locking carabiner is a great way to attach yourself to the rope for glacier mountaineering. If you didn't have a triple-action locking carabiner, then you might want to use two twist locking carabiners or two screw gate carabiners or a twist lock and a screw gate carabiner or a combination of a non-locking carabiner and a locking carabiner to attach yourself to the rope so that if something were to happen, your life wouldn't be in jeopardy. A prusik loop is a loop of round material that's used for a variety of rescue applications. Mostly for our purposes, it's used for crevasse rescue. What we're starting with here is 5mm diameter accessory cord. This is specifically Sterling brand 5mm accessory cord, which is more supple, which means it bends easily without becoming kinked. And it's 5 foot in length. So just think 5mm, 5 foot. The ends have been burned, and then it's going to be connected so it ends up in a loop. Okay? And the loop is going to be with a double fisherman's knot, so that once the loop is finished, you end up with a piece of material that's maybe 19 inches long, and this will be used by your guides in the event of an emergency, and they either need to attach themselves or you to a rope with a prusik, or sometimes if there's particularly steep terrain like on Mount Rainier, they might attach you to a fixed line using a series of prusik hitches and locking carabiners on an existing rope that's attached into the glacier. Another piece of technical gear that we use on specific glacier mountaineering trips, such as climbs of Mount Shuksan, climbs of Sahale Peak, sometimes climbs in North Cascades National Park, like on Forbidden Peak, is an ATC or belay device. And a belay device, it's kind of a funny looking gadget here. A piece of rope slots into this, and through the bending action of the rope around a locking carabiner, which should always be paired with the belay device, it increases the friction substantially, which will allow your average person to hold with a minimum of force someone on the very end of a rope. So this is commonly used when there is rock climbing or ice climbing or rappelling involved. If you're doing a standard climb of, say, Mount Rainier or Mount Baker or Glacier Peak, Mount Olympus, sometimes you might need these, but most of our glacier climbs, you won't find an ATC on the packing list. But if you do, this is what it looks like. It comes with a locking carabiner, and oftentimes you're going to use it for rappelling or descending on the rope.